Welcome to the Lion City. Singapore is a complete 180 from my time in Cambodia. Singapore is the home of many things. The home of the world's #1 airport, the home of crazy rich Asians, the food capital of Southeast Asia, the country that successfully intertwines nature into buildings, the world's most successful police state, chewing gum is illegal, only country in the world to get their independence against their will.
There's a lot to unpack here with Singapore. Let's dive into some geography.
Singapore is located just south of Malaysia. To its east is a collection of islands known as the Rayu Islands. To its west is the Strait of Malacca. 95% of the landmass of Singapore is on the main island of Singapore. There are 63 smaller islands scattered throughout the southern part of the country. And like all small island nations who have a ton of money, they have undergone the process of land reclamation, and they have increased the landmass of the country by 22% since independence. And even with this extra 22% of land, Singapore is a really, really small country. It is roughly 1/4 the size of Rhode Island, the smallest state in the US. So who actually lives here? Nearly 5.6 million people fit into this tiny island. Singapore is also famous for its really low fertility rate, coming in at 0.9 children per couple, one of the lowest in the entire world. The economy is insanely competitive, coming in at #1 in the entire world, and they have a top 5 GDP per capita. So who actually lives here? 74% identifies ethnically Chinese. The next biggest group is the Malays, coming in around 13%. Third biggest group is the Indians at 10%. So that covers the background on Singapore. Let's see what I actually did there. You were probably expecting a really cool transition, but no, I'm going to start with this low quality image I took on my airplane food because it was well worth the time to talk about. I was so shocked that they were even offering food on this flight because it was a 2-hour flight. I may have been slightly hungover, but this was far and away the best airplane food I've ever had in my life. This is a dish called laksa. It's a spicy noodle dish popular in Southwest Asia. Absolutely amazing. And as soon as I had this, I knew that Singapore was going to be in a completely different ballpark. After landing, I came to the $1.7 billion upgrade to the airport known as the Jewel.
Alright, let's start vlog in here. Chiang Mai Airport, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. First impressions, I don't know what the rest of Singapore is going to look like, but the flight alone to come here was worth it. This is just absolutely insane. Everything that Hudson Yards was trying to become, Chiang Mai Airport is that, and it's 10x better. I don't know how Hudson Yards saw this and messed it up so bad. This is probably the craziest thing I've ever seen indoors.
This nature-themed entertainment and retail complex on the inside of the airport hosts the world's tallest indoor waterfall, 300 retail and dining outlets, and receives 300,000 visitors per day, which is incredibly hard to comprehend. On the top floor, there are all kinds of activities, and of course, I did them all. There's a walking net, a glass canopy bridge, this super fun hedge maze that I ran through, a mirror maze, and the list keeps going. Everything was so fun, well designed, and thoughtful. All the hype and the press that this airport gets is well deserved. I haven't been to that many other top airports, but I don't know how anyone is going to top this thing. Finished off my time at the airport by getting some Shake Shack. It was delicious. Headed to the hotel, went to bed, and got ready for some yoga on top of the Marina Bay Sands the next morning. So I woke up at 6 a.m. the next morning to make sure I got there on time, and what a way to start a day. So after yoga, I went and got some breakfast and then went to this really cool science museum. There were these really fun light shows, a massive exhibit on Buckminster Fuller, and so much more to see. After the museum, I walked to a hawker center, which were featured in Crazy Rich Asians. Some of these food court stalls have Michelin star ratings. Anthony Bourdain visited a couple of them, and I gotta be honest, for the price point, absolutely amazing. Super affordable, super fresh, and most importantly, delicious. I went to this hawker center specifically to try one of Singapore's most famous foods. It's chicken rice.
I think it's pretty clear from my face. It's hot, I'm getting tired. It's been 8 hours just walking around. Walked 45 minutes to this hawker center. Finally gonna get some of this famous chicken rice. Let's see what the hype's all about.
The chicken rice was absolutely delicious, and it was like $6 for that massive plate. I mean, what's not to like? It's chicken, it's rice, some sauce. Life was good.
Well, the sun stays undefeated. It's not as hot here, but I tried to still walk through the heat of the day, and absolutely exhausted. I just hung out in a coffee shop for about the last hour, just cooling off. I feel good, like it's definitely not a heat stroke or anything near that, but definitely feeling the heat for sure. But gonna power through for the next, say maybe 2 hours, go check a few things out, then probably head back early. You'd think I would have learned by now to not power through from like noon to 3, but here I am doing the same damn thing. So live and learn, but not for me.
Spoiler, I did not make it through the next 2 hours. I immediately went back to the hotel and basically passed out for the rest of the night. The only thing I did was sign up for another yoga class to start the day off again tomorrow. And thank God I did, because after doing 35,000 steps this day, I needed to stretch it out.
My body needed yoga in the worst way this day, and I was so thankful I could get up here and do it again. Felt way better after getting up here and stretching out early in the morning to start the day. So what did I do the rest of the day to go out and really enjoy the culture, really experience the people there? No. I went to the bottom of the Marina Bay Sands and started gambling. And let me tell you what, this is one of the craziest gambling experiences I've ever had. Not only does it cost a local Singaporean resident 150 Singaporean dollars every time they go into the casino.
So everybody playing next to me wasn't even betting on their own hands. They were exclusively betting on top of my bets. And I was betting about 50 Singaporean dollars per hand, and they were betting 5, but still taking the winnings and then handing them to me as if it was their bet. I'd never seen anything like that. And on top of that, there were 0 ATMs inside the casino. So it's like Singapore's way of trying to like govern and legislate the casino so that if you go in there, you can only go in with what you have. But people obviously just come out and go get more money and then come back in. But it was a really interesting environment. And if you would do those things back in the States, you would immediately get kicked out and banned for life from touching somebody else's money like that. It was really interesting. I came out making 275 Singaporean dollars, which is about equivalent of like $200.
So after finishing up at the casino, I walked around a little bit, saw this island out in the middle of nowhere, couldn't figure out what it was, so I started asking. Turns out it's an Apple store. I mean, look at this thing, just beyond over the top, even for Apple.
I then walked over to the Gardens by the Bay, which has these incredible cloud forests inside, waterfalls, everything else in between. But I really messed up here and didn't take enough pictures. But trust me when I say this, cloud forest is well worth it.
However, the only touristy thing that I did in Singapore that wasn't that impressive was this tree canopy bridge here. While it had cool views of the city, it was basically just a suspended bridge with these fake looking trees. I'm not really sure what the hype is, and kind of walked away disappointed. So if you're ever in Singapore, would honestly just say save your $10 on this one. Not really worth it. And then again, for the second day in a row, it became incredibly hot during the peak of the day. Shocker, I know. So I then went and hung out in the same coffee shop for about 2 hours to cool off and get some fluids. I then went back to the part of town I was staying in known as Little India, did some window shopping, and then went and got some amazing Indian food for the rest of the night. This chicken was absolutely delicious, and of course got some naan bread with it. And as all my followers and subscribers know, the meal isn't over until I hate myself. So I actually went out and got a second dinner, but as you can see from this picture here, it doesn't really look like I'm out eating it. And that's because as I was walking around to get it, I had a near heat stroke, had to take the second dinner home, took the coldest shower of my life, turned the AC down as much as I could so I didn't have a heat stroke, and then ate it in bed. And I'll tell you what, this meal is absolutely delicious. It was well worth the potential heat stroke, and I'm so glad I got it.
And that for the most part wraps up my trip in Singapore. However, what I kept thinking about the entire time while I was there is how is this tiny island nation of less than 6 million people, a quarter the size of Rhode Island, punching above its weight so much financially, economically, and with just absolutely incredible buildings, intertwined with nature, so much more going on. What's the real background here and how are they doing this?
It's really important to understand the history in order to fully contextualize how we got here. So Singapore was actually conquered and occupied by the Japanese during World War II. After World War II ended, Singapore reverted British control. And then eventually 20 years later, they formed a federation of Malay to basically combine with Malaysia. However, social unrest and disputes between Singapore's ruling party and Malaysia's ruling party resulted in Singapore's expulsion from Malaysia. Malaysia essentially kicked them out of the country. So Singapore became independent in August of 1965. So how did they go from not even being wanted to be inside of Malaysia to being an absolute world economic power? If I could distill it down to one thing, I would call it trade. Singapore is perfectly situated as a transport hub. Their oceanic shipping container port is the second largest in the world, just behind Shanghai. And it's easy to see why this is such a major advantage for this small country to really build up their economic might. And on top of that, I mentioned earlier in the video about the authoritarian government, and it's true, they do. You're not allowed to protest. Pretty much whatever the government says, that's what you have to do. And for better or worse, for this really small island with less than 6 million people, it's worked out really well for them. They've one of the highest life expectancies in the world, top 5 GDP per capita, and enjoy one of the best healthcare systems in the entire world, as well as a very, very, very low homelessness rate. And while, because it's such a small country and they have a lot of advantages, such as a really airtight immigration policy, but what they are doing is working. And for a country that just started less than 60 years ago, sometimes it's hard to argue the results. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what the government there is doing, but for those that are benefiting from the system, it is working out pretty nicely. For my short time here, I really enjoyed it. Would highly recommend going back. back. I mean, like I said, the airport alone is well worth the trip, but a quick 4 to 8 hour jaunt in Singapore is well worth it. You're gonna love it. I have a lot more to say about the government and the politics behind Singapore and how they're benefiting from their regional advantages, but this video has already become too long, so that'll be for my next drop. Up next is my time in Vietnam, dropping next Sunday. Get excited.